Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. My very, very good friend, Doug Williamson, he's on the program. He's a regular contributor on The Price of Business, and I love what he brings to the program. He brings, the feedback I've got back from listeners is that the guy brings a real world perspective to what's happening on the political and economic front. And I think that's true, and it's kind of like you have a style that's kind of like everyone's neighbor, but it's a neighbor who's well informed. Doug, it's always good to talk to you.
Hey, good to talk to you, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. First of all, let's talk about your book. Why don't you kind of introduce us to the listener who's not familiar with your great book that I have strongly recommended many times over the last couple of years on this program.
Well, since most people don't know me, I originally did my first book. I self-published it through Ex Libris. And, it was a very passionate book because, I just couldn't understand what was going on in this country and everything. And I started that back originally when Obama got elected and everything. And, I just started writing down thoughts and everything. And that's the reason I named it Thoughts of an American Taxpayer, because it really was a bunch of scratch pieces of paper of thoughts, and then chapters started getting together. And then it's just, I looked at it, when I was on that trip to New York with my publisher here a while back, I looked back through it, and there's really actually some great information in there. Because what I did later on, I figured I'd update it a little bit. So Tate Publishing, I sent a manuscript to them, and they wanted to update it for me. So I went through them, they updated it, and I got both books that are out there, Ex Libris, The Thoughts of an American Taxpayer, and Tate Publishing, Thoughts of an American Taxpayer. And I did that, because I just don't know what's going on with this country, especially for our kids and grandkids. I mean, I'm 58 years old, and I just don't know what's going to happen here in the next 10 years because they just continue to get us in debt, and they don't seem to care in D.C. I don't care if they have an R, D, or an I, and the media just keeps covering for them. I mean, the media don't even care. It's like a big game for the media and the politicians. That's all it is.
That's all it is. It's a terrible, terrible situation, and it's only getting worse. And the kind of arguments we're having now, you've got worldwide global terrorism, you've got ISIS spreading throughout Europe like a cancer, and you've got Barack Obama in France talking about climate change.
Exactly, and and his comments to France. I mean, I would never allow that guy back in my country. It's a setback. I mean, his comments, is just unbelievable about France. I mean, it's just like. He loves the Muslims and hates Americans and hates everybody else,
Yeah, and I continue, I'm not sure if it's a Muslim thing as it is an anti-Western thing. The guy is anti-Western, yet he's the president of the most powerful country in the Western world. It's just mind-boggling if you think about it. It's almost like sci-fi.
And to follow up on that, he just hates everything that this country stands for.
He absolutely does. I think so. I think he largely does. And, people say that and they call it inflammatory rhetoric, but there's just so much behavior and so much reality that lines up with that rhetoric.
Exactly.
So talk a little bit about, the fact that you've got this ISIS threat. I thought it interesting, that how's this kind of for a bizarre scenario? So you had Russia go into Turkey airspace, and Turkey shot the plane down after several warnings. And now there's this little buzz that's going on the internet. I don't think a lot of people think about this because, Obama, one of the very few strong statements on the international front was his defense of Turkey in shooting down that Russian plane. That was a pretty strong defense. I was kind of shocked by that. But, I saw some buzz, in social media. It's an interesting reality. Everyone thinks Turkey is part of this coalition to help the situation, but the reality is, how the Middle East is. Our enemy's enemy is our friend. Right. That's how the Middle East works. Well, guess what? Who's the biggest threat on the ground to ISIS but the Kurds? Right. And who hates the Kurds more than Turkey?
Right.
You ever thought about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's just this guy, he seems like he tries to make himself look like he's the smartest man in the world, and he's really the dumbest,
It certainly seems to be the most disconnected. Yeah. He's like the absent-minded professor who's not connected at all to reality.
Well, exactly.
So I know you got to be continuing to watch the political front. I, for one, was delighted to see that Ted Cruz is now within 2 points of Donald Trump, number 2 in polls in Iowa, and now in the 20-point range, 23%, I think I saw. It seems to be that, I've said this all along, is that, Trump is kind of fun to date, but then when you think about him being the head of the family, it makes you nervous. And I think that's what people have begun to think about Donald Trump as chief executive of the United States of America.
It is, and I think most people's appetite for Trump is, he was saying all the right things, pushing all the right buttons, and he a lot of people are tired of the politicians. Just like, I've talked about the Convention of the States that Mark Levin talks about all the time. conventionofthestates.org or whatever.
Yeah,
and that's the 34 out of the 50 governors taking over, or more or less, closing down the federal government.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot more complicated than that, and so do you, but it just in essence, I just don't see anything else. I just don't see elections getting this country back on track. I just don't think the federal government serves any purpose anymore.
Yeah, I believe that. To me, of course, that would be paramount to civil war, but this is a logical way to systematically pursue it. I've always been afraid of a constitutional convention, which this would lead to. But on the other hand, we totally disregard the U.S. Constitution anyway. We have literally nothing to lose these days.
It seems like everybody takes an oath to it up there in D.C. They take the oath one day, and the next day they don't care about the oath.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Ted Cruz, this guy, he can articulate, his speech. He doesn't need a monitor, to read. He's a very compassionate conservative, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I think he would do a great job. And if he could, I know Trump would never do it, but, if Trump would be like a VP, it'd be great because, you want you want some kind of guy with business sense in there. Seems like none of these guys know the value of a dollar up in D.C.
Yeah.
They keep printing money, and they just keep printing. And they don't understand. I guess we're headed to $19 trillion in debt. Obama's going to cut it in half, and instead he's almost doubled it. Well, he has doubled it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a very, very disturbing situation that we're living in, and we need someone who's very serious. I think that of the lot out there today, the most serious, in my opinion, is Ted Cruz.
I think so too.
I really do, and I hope that people can catch on. And he's one of those people that they love to underestimate. I say anyone who wants to underestimate Ted Cruz, get on the phone and call David Dewhurst.
Exactly.
Because David Dewhurst outspent Ted Cruz almost 15-1, and Ted Cruz figured out how to become the U.S. Senator, which no one in the world of politics thought was possible. Hey, I really appreciate you. What's your website before we wrap it up here?
www.thepatriotsview.com. And, Ted actually beat Dewhurst and his political machine.
Yep, he absolutely did.
But, thanks, Kevin, for having me on. I appreciate it, buddy. And you have a great day, buddy.
I always appreciate you, man.
Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, man.
It was awesome. Thank you. ThePatriotsView.com. When we come back, more for you on The Price of Business.